All right. It's my first week at a new school, and I'm called into the school office. You might be wondering why. Confused, I sit on a bench and I worry. The school secretary tells me to take a seat and that my mom will be there soon. I think, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? When my mom arrives after a few minutes, she shows up looking outraged. My 8-year-old self is definitely panicked. The issue? My mother forgot to fill out the question about my race and ethnicity. And because it was left blank on my school enrollment form, I wasn't allowed to attend class until the right box was checked. The problem is, there wasn't a right box for me. My mother walks over to the secretary and lets her know this was not an oversight. She intentionally chose to not check any boxes. My mother informed them, my daughter doesn't fit in any one box, and she's not an other. And with that, she takes my hand and we walk out. Come on, mijita, we're going home. Tomorrow you will come back to school. As we get to the car, I see tears fill her eyes. As she turns to look at me and says, Mija, you aren't one or the other. You are all of who you are. Never forget that. The U.S. Census Bureau has included questions about race and ethnicity every year since 1890. Of course, with formats changing over time as our demographics change, societal attitudes change, and government policies change. In 2000 was the first year respondents were able to check more than one box for a racial category, something my 8-year-old self couldn't celebrate. Over the years, I've had a lot of people try to pinpoint my identity, to try to sort me into boxes they feel comfortable with or that are familiar. What are you has been asked multiple times. It's a familiar question and a little too all familiar. When I dated a Hawaiian, I was asked, what island are you from? The island of Colorado? Not fitting in the box is why I felt I had to change myself in order to be loved and accepted. I straightened my hair, I dyed it blonde, and I wore green contacts through most of my young adulthood. I felt I needed to change myself in order to belong, to be liked and loved and accepted. Why would anyone with natural hair like mine feel like they need to do anything different with it? Because since that day in the school office, I've run into people who struggle with the fact that they cannot easily categorize me. And sometimes they get angry. This has led to some dangerous and uncomfortable situations. One time while working out at a gym, 2 men who didn't look like me pushed their benches closer to mine and boxed me in. They became aggressive and started saying things that were testing my self-acceptance. Things like, you're taking up too much space. Remember, they boxed me in. They demanded that I leave. It was clear that my very existence made these men uncomfortable. Thankfully, I walked away unharmed because a teenage boy intervened. I will never forget his bravery to stand up when others didn't. As I was leaving, another man came up to me with tears in his eyes. He apologized. He said he imagined his daughter in a similar situation. He called himself a coward. I said, next time be brave, because I am someone's daughter. Regardless of how those men acted, I still maintain my inherent belief in the goodness of humans. I place my faith in the brave ones. That's why we need each other, to bravely remind us that we are beyond the box. That when trying to fit in the box is hurting us, we need each other to remind us that we are more than the labels society gives us, that we are more than enough. Because of those years that I felt like I didn't belong, I know how important it is to create connections and to bring people in. Conversations have a beautiful way of bringing people in. To create conversations that create connection, we need to move away from asking questions like, what are you? Or, but where are you really from? And towards questions that look to forge deep connection. Ask questions from a place of belonging. How? Just start a conversation. Be like a young man in Denver that I've grown to know quite well. About 40 years ago, he asked out a woman from a different background than his. And soon, they were married. And soon after that, they welcomed a baby girl who would grow to become the woman standing in front of you today. When my parents met, they didn't have much in common. Not just from a cultural perspective, but I mean, my mom is 5'1" and my dad is 6'3". They definitely had different worldviews. But from lived experiences, my mom talks about how excited she was and impressed that my father just wanted to get to know her. He wanted to learn about her worldview. My father asked thoughtful questions, he didn't make assumptions, and he listened to learn. Conversations have the power to create connections. Sometimes conversations can be difficult and uncomfortable. A power I've learned that I have is that I can have difficult conversations because my whole life has been a difficult conversation. People want to be heard. And because of these conversations that create connections and listening to learn, guiding me through the difficult ones, my world has gotten so much bigger. Because here's the thing. None of us fit neatly into a box. We all have depths of identity that extend beyond race and ethnicity to include things like sexual orientation, gender, neurodiversity, geographic location, nationality, to name but just a few. Like my mother said, we aren't one or the other. We are all of who we are. That day in the office, my mother gave me a gift. She let me know that regardless what the world said, I didn't need to change who I was. It was, in fact, the world that needed to change. And listen, we aren't going to change overnight. We have been dealing with these boxes for a long time. But that being said, today, I hope that you can take the gifts that my multicultural experience has given. Gifts that see people for who they are and who they want to be. Gifts that hear people and listen to learn. Gifts that start conversations that turn into connections. Gifts that say, I will stand up with you and for you. Multiculturalism is a love letter to the world because it lives and thrives outside the boxes. To embrace multiculturalism is to embrace humanity at its finest. because to be multicultural is to be human. I was able to return to school when I was 8. My mother eventually filled out the form, completing my enrollment. On the question about race and ethnicity, rather than check a box, she drew her own and selected it. A red human. My reminder for anyone who feels like they don't fit in a box: you were never meant to. Thank you.